We're keeping an eye on this very serious story out of Milwaukee. The Bucks announced yesterday that Damian Lillard has been diagnosed with a blood clot in his right calf that will sideline him indefinitely. He met with several specialists to diagnose the issue and is on blood thinners to stabilize the clot. Now the Bucks must battle for their spot in the postseason without their star point guard. Milwaukee currently sits in 5th in the East, and we are wishing Dame all the best and a speedy recovery. Here's tonight's ESPN NBA doubleheader. LeBron and the Lakers play the second game on a 4-game road trip against Tyrese Halliburton and the Pacers at 7:30 Eastern. Then the Celtics will be in the middle of their longest road trip of the season when they take on KD and the Suns. NBA Countdown tipping off our coverage at 7 Eastern. Coming up right after First Take at noon Eastern on ESPN, Pat McAfee with an exclusive conversation with the King, LeBron James. Those two sitting down together for an hour plus. Here's a sneak peek.
You trying to tell me Giannis wouldn't be able to play an NBA game in the 70s?
I think handshake. He wouldn't be able to do it.
Neither would you. Neither would you.
Giannis Antetokounmpo would have 250 points in a game in the 70s. 250.
Is that Kuzi? When was Kuzi playing?
Kuzi, I feel like they were cueing you.
I think so.
Brian Windhorst back here with us. Doggy, do you agree that Giannis would have dominated if he played in the 70s?
Well, I'll say this to LeBron. Has he heard of Julius Erving? Okay? Giannis is not as good as Julius Erving. Did Julius Erving, who played in the 70s, was on the Sixers in the 70s, do you think that Julius Erving scored 250 points in a quote-unquote game or averaged 50 a game? Here's what I want LeBron to do. He probably doesn't seen it. Here's what I want you to do, LeBron. I want you to go take a peek at the 77. You want to go 70s? Go take a peek at the 77 Trailblazers, okay? You go watch Walton, and you go watch Mo Lucas play in the front court. Mo Lucas, who wouldn't take nonsense for nobody. The first time that Giannis would go in the lane, he'd be knocked on his rear end. No three-point line, not a lot of up and down. Let me see Giannis against that team. Let me see him go out there and average 50 points a game. You know what? Julius didn't. He lost to that Portland team in the NBA Final. Embarrassed. They lost 4 straight games after they were up 2-0. And Giannis is not Julius Erving. He's not in the same ballpark as Julius Erving's top 12 player in the history of the NBA. Giannis is not in that scenario. So that bothers me. When you bring up the 70s, my era, when I grew up, and I watched every game, night in and night out, to 3 o'clock in the morning. A lot of these finals were on tape delay. To sit there and embarrass the guys who played in the 70s, Bill Walton, Kareem, are you, all these great centers, are you nuts? Giannis is a great player. Nobody's going to say he's not a great player. But don't sit there and say that this is ridiculous to compare him that he's so much better than anybody in the 70s, because he's not. Steve, you know Julius well. He's not on this level. No way in 70s basketball. Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm going to give it to Wendy first. I'm going to go last on this one. Go ahead, Wendy.
All right. Okay, obviously 250 points, LeBron's being a little bit farcical there. And I don't think anybody's touching the Wilt Chamberlain, what was it, the 62, 61, 62, 62, 63, Mr. Mad Dog, the
61, 62, 61, 62.
Yeah.
50 points a game.
It's in statistical concrete, okay? So statistically, no one's touching that Wilt Chamberlain. Having said that, Artis Gilmore played in the 70s, right, Mad Dog?
Yes, he did.
Julius Erving played in the 70s. You could argue that Giannis is sort of a combination of like an Artis Gilmore and Julius Erving, because Giannis is one of the great interior scorers in the modern era, one of the great interior scorers in the history of the game. And he also has athleticism and the ability to drive the ball to the basket like Julius Erving. I'm not going to get into an argument over who's better between Julius and Giannis. I have heard, veterans from that era. I remember hearing Cedric Maxwell compare Julius and Giannis, for example. I just remember that. But what LeBron is referring to is the combination that Giannis is, that he's a 5-time all-defensive team, former defensive player of the year, and this year he's going to average 30 points a game for the 4th straight season. And so what LeBron is saying is that there was never a specimen, in that time in the NBA who could combine that level of size like you would have with Artis Gilmore, who could be dominant scoring around the rim and dominant defending the rim, and the athleticism that you would have with Dr. J, who could attack the rim. I think it's the hybrid that LeBron is referring to.
Wendy, it's beautiful that LeBron has somebody like you to explain things the way that you do, as articulate as you are, because the reality is that you're right in what you're saying. LeBron might have been a bit hyperbolic with his statement, but he was right on his face, doggy, in terms of the extraordinary athlete that Giannis is, what he has accomplished en route to averaging 30-plus for a fourth straight year. You know, a multiple-time defensive player of the year. The dude is a gazelle. The brother is special, and there's no doubt about that. Now, back in the 70s, he would have got knocked on his ass a lot more. He would have been asked to go to the free throw line a lot more. He would have been extraordinarily exposed for his deficiency in that department, and obviously that's something that would have hurt him. In the same breath, I get where you're bringing up, and I'm going to educate the viewers on this. I understand why you're bringing up Julius Erving. Julius Erving essentially was a small forward, wasn't even a power forward, certainly wasn't a center. But Julius Erving was Michael Jordan before Michael Jordan arrived. That's what he meant to the NBA. His athleticism, his acrobatic plays, the cradle dunk over Michael Cooper is still one of the legendary dunks of all times at the Spectrum in Philadelphia. Here's the problem with what LeBron James did. It's still disrespectful to the previous eras. And there's no call for it. And so when he does what he does on that level, that's him, passive aggressively yet again, finding a way to take shots because inherently he has a problem with himself being compared to dudes from previous eras because folks talk about him. They talk about what he would have been. For example, he's not my GOAT. He's Shannon's GOAT. He might be yours or somebody else. He's not mine. Why do I say that? Because the road to prosperity that he had to travel, I believe going up against the old guard like Jordan and them, they would have stopped him before he learned how to win. I'm not talking about LeBron once he learned how to win. I'm talking about the LeBron that was absent prior to that person that showed up. And if you got to go up against a killer like Michael Jordan and others who would try to snatch your heart right out of your chest, I believe somebody like Jordan would have impeded his path. Nobody was going to impede Kobe. Nobody was going to impede MJ. Nobody's going to impede Duncan and people like that. But him, I believe he would have been impeded, which is why I have Jordan there. The previous eras are what enables you to be who you are. We look at this industry, for example. What would we have been if it were not for Stuart Scott? What would we have been, doggy, if it were not for the Dick Vitales? What would we have been if we didn't have somebody like a Howard Cosell to lean on and to see what he brought? Every single era you point to has a previous era that paved the way. We didn't see a Giannis because a Giannis didn't exist. It had to, the game evolved, and as the game evolved and whatever they put in the food and got dudes growing to be 7 feet and run like that or whatever, you saw that kind of capability. It didn't exist in the world in the 70s or the 60s in a lot of people's eyes. Fair enough, but when Doggy brings up Bill Walton, have you seen Bill Walton play? Did you see him in the 70s? Did you see his hops? Did you see his mobility? Did you see his athleticism before his feet gave way? Bill Walton was something special. And so I'm just saying that when you allude to the previous eras, right, and you do so in that kind of way, what you're doing is showing a disrespect that's sprinkled with resentment because you hate the fact that people are able to point to a previous era and talk about what you're not instead of appreciating what you are. That's what LeBron James did with that particular soundbite. I understand it, but it's still not fair to those from a previous era.
Well, you'll hear more from LeBron in the LeBron Versation with Pat McAfee. That is right after us at noon Eastern. And no, I did not come up with...
Can't miss that. I'm sure you have one.
I did not come up with LeBron Versation.
That's a great job by McAfee. You know, getting a guy in there for an hour. I know they're playing the Pacers tonight. That's a great job.
In studio.
Give him credit. That's a hell of a spot. Who would not want to talk to LeBron for an hour? Wendy can. He never come on with me. That's a great spot. Give him credit for that. Go ahead.
He wouldn't come on with me. No, I don't think so.
Shout to PMAC. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
All right, guys.
he'd probably harm somebody if they even approached him about coming on with me.
I'm not so sure, Stevie. I think you'd be a good spot.
Okay.
I'd like to watch that myself.
All right, let's
I'd watch.